Let me ask you something. Why does it feel like the moment you pull away, the person who seemed so distant, so unavailable, suddenly starts craving you? Why does someone who ran from connection now seem addicted to you? Why do avoidants, the very people who feared intimacy, become obsessed the second you stop giving them attention? It's not a coincidence. It's not random. It's psychology. It's human nature. See, most people think that avoidants are emotionally detached, that they don't care, that they're just cold. But that's not true. They care deeply, but they fear losing control of their emotions, so they push away the very thing they crave, believing they can always come back when they're ready. But here's where things change. When you go no contact, when you remove yourself from their world completely, something flips inside them, because suddenly they aren't the ones choosing distance anymore. You are. And that uncertainty, that loss of control, that's what starts driving them crazy. Because here's what happens next. Avoidants fear intimacy, but also fear abandonment. Avoidants exist in a paradox. On the surface, they seem independent, self-sufficient, and emotionally detached. They tell themselves and others that they don't need deep emotional connections, that they value their space, and that too much closeness feels suffocating. But underneath that carefully crafted exterior is a different reality. They still crave connection, they still want love, and they still experience the fear of being abandoned. This internal contradiction is what makes relationships with avoidance so challenging. When things start getting close, when emotional intimacy begins to deepen, the avoidant instinctively starts retreating. They find excuses to pull away, whether it's work, stress, or suddenly deciding they just aren't ready for something serious. They create emotional distance because intimacy makes them feel exposed. To them, closeness isn't comforting, it's dangerous. It triggers subconscious fears of being engulfed, losing control, or being smothered. But here's where the paradox kicks in. While they push away connection, they also deeply fear being abandoned. They may act like they don't care if you walk away. They may say they don't need the relationship, but the moment they sense you slipping away for good, panic starts setting in. Their fear of intimacy and their fear of abandonment are two sides of the same coin. This is rooted in their attachment style, often formed in early childhood. Many avoidants grew up in environments where emotional needs weren't consistently met. Maybe their caregivers were emotionally unavailable, dismissive, or even overwhelmed with their own struggles. The child learned that relying on others for emotional support was unsafe or futile. They developed a defense mechanism. I'll take care of myself. I won't rely on anyone. This pattern carries over into adulthood. They enter relationships but never fully let themselves be seen. They keep their partner at a distance, never diving too deep. They crave connection on a subconscious level, but have trained themselves to avoid depending on someone emotionally. This is why the moment you show deep affection, care, or a desire for emotional closeness, they start feeling overwhelmed. The closer you get, the stronger their instinct to withdraw. It's not because they don't care about you, it's because closeness activates the very thing they fear, needing someone and risking getting hurt. But here's what's crucial. That fear of abandonment never fully disappears. It just gets buried under the illusion of independence. When you're present, they don't have to acknowledge it. But when you pull away, when you go silent, that illusion starts cracking, and suddenly they're forced to feel what they've been avoiding all along, the possibility of truly losing you. That's why no contact hits them so hard. It pulls them into the exact emotional discomfort they spend their lives avoiding. And when that happens, the script flips. Chasing them reinforces their emotional distance. When you chase an avoidant, you validate their core belief that closeness is overwhelming and that they need to withdraw in order to feel safe. Every time you reach out first, every time you try to pull them back into the relationship, it reinforces their subconscious programming. Closeness equals pressure. Avoidants thrive in relationships where they feel in control of the emotional rhythm. They want to be the ones who decide when to engage and when to retreat. The moment they sense that their partner is the one initiating closeness, they instinctively lean away. Not because they don't care, but because deep inside, their nervous system is wired to associate closeness with emotional suffocation. Chasing only exacerbates this. It confirms their belief that emotions are unpredictable and difficult to manage. Instead of feeling like they are choosing to be in the relationship, they start feeling pursued. And when someone feels pursued, their instinct is to run. This is why so many people dealing with an avoidant partner feel exhausted. It's like playing a never-ending game of emotional tug-of-war. You reach out, they pull away. You try harder, they go even further. The more love and reassurance you try to give, the more emotionally distant they become. It's not because they don't appreciate it, it's because it makes them feel trapped. Think about it this way. If a wild animal is cornered, its first instinct is to escape, not because it doesn't belong in the environment, but because it perceives a lack of freedom. Avoidants function the same way in relationships. They equate emotional pursuit with entrapment. And the more you chase, the more they resist. Now, this is where most people make a critical mistake. When an avoidant starts pulling away, the anxious response is to close the gap. You send more texts, you ask what's wrong, you try to remind them of the connection. You think if I can just show them how much I care, they'll come back. But that's not how their mind works. To an avoidant, pursuit equals pressure. The more pressure they feel, the more they associate the relationship with discomfort. And the more discomfort they feel, the more they need to create distance. But here's where things get interesting. The moment you stop chasing, their entire experience changes. When you remove the pressure, when you go no contact, when you stop feeding the cycle, something shifts in their mind. Suddenly, the absence of pursuit creates a void, a space where they have to sit with their own emotions instead of distracting themselves with their usual withdrawal tactics. Now, instead of feeling pursued, they feel uncertainty. Instead of feeling like they have control, they start questioning why you're no longer chasing. And that's when the addiction begins. No contact disrupts their control and comfort zone. Avoidants operate best when they feel in control of the emotional dynamics in a relationship. They regulate closeness and distance on their terms, keeping their partner at just the right level of emotional investment, never too far to lose them, but never too close to feel overwhelmed. This dynamic allows them to maintain a sense of security because they are the ones dictating when and how connection happens. But when you implement no contact, you completely disrupt their sense of control. Avoidants don't expect you to walk away completely. They assume that no matter how much distance they create, you'll always be there. They expect you to text first, to check in, to try to bridge the gap they've created. And in their mind, that means they can safely continue keeping you at a distance without ever truly losing you. But when you go silent, when you remove yourself from their orbit, something unexpected happens. The balance they were so comfortable maintaining suddenly shifts, and for the first time, they have to face a reality they were avoiding. You're no longer a guaranteed presence in their life. This disruption is powerful because it forces them to sit with emotions they've spent years avoiding. Avoidants build their relationships around managing distance, not necessarily ending them. They don't like conflict, and they don't want to be the bad guy. That's why so many of them simply withdraw instead of having direct conversations about their feelings. They assume that by subtly disengaging, you'll take on the emotional labor of trying to fix things, which allows them to maintain distance without facing real consequences. But when no contact is implemented, all of that goes out the window. They are no longer in charge of the distance, you are. The power they once had to control the relationship dynamic disappears, and in its place, a feeling they despise takes hold. Uncertainty. The certainty of your presence, the predictability of you always reaching out is gone. And now they're left wondering where you went, why you stopped trying, and whether or not they've actually lost you for good. Now, instead of feeling like they have control, they feel out of control. And for someone who has spent their entire life keeping emotions at arm's length, that loss of control is unsettling. They start checking their phone, wondering why you haven't reached out. They replay past interactions, trying to decipher if you meant what you said when you walked away. They start feeling a pull, an urge to reestablish the balance they lost. And this is where the shift happens. Because now, instead of them pulling away, they're being forced to sit with the consequences of their own actions. Instead of them controlling the pace, they're the ones waiting. Instead of them deciding when and how to engage, they're left wondering if they even have that option anymore. And for the first time, they begin to experience the exact fear they've been avoiding all along. The fear of truly losing you. The absence creates a psychological vacuum. Avoidants structure their relationships in a way that allows them to feel emotionally safe. They keep people at a distance, managing the connection in a way that ensures they don't feel too vulnerable. This means that when you're present, even if they aren't fully engaging, they still feel secure in knowing that you're there. You provide emotional consistency even if they aren't reciprocating at the same level. But when you remove yourself entirely, when you go no contact, something unexpected happens. A psychological vacuum is created. At first, they might try to suppress it. They tell themselves that they're fine, that they don't need to reach out, that the distance is what they wanted in the first place. But the mind doesn't work that way. When a habit is disrupted, the brain notices. This is why avoidants, despite their tendency to withdraw, often start obsessing over the person who has gone no contact. It's not just about missing you, it's about the sudden realization that their world is quieter without you. The texts they used to expect, gone. The check-ins they took for granted, no longer there. The presence they assumed would always be in their orbit, vanish. And the mind does what it always does when something it relied on is suddenly missing. It starts searching for ways to bring it back. This is when the avoidant begins experiencing intrusive thoughts about you. They start wondering what you're doing, who you're with, whether or not you've moved on. They replay past conversations, looking for signs that you are truly done. They scroll through old messages, rereading things they once dismissed. And with every passing day that you remain silent, the vacuum grows. This is why over time, avoidants start feeling a growing urge to reconnect. It doesn't always happen immediately. Some will resist for weeks or even months, convincing themselves that they are fine, but eventually the silence becomes louder than they expected, and because the brain hates an unresolved pattern, they start seeking ways to close the emotional loop. This is when they might start checking your social media more frequently, looking for clues about your life without them. They might casually ask mutual friends about you. They might start reminiscing about the relationship in ways they never allowed themselves to before. And eventually that vacuum, that sense of something missing, becomes too strong to ignore. They start obsessing over you due to uncertainty. Avoidants spend most of their time managing emotional distance, carefully balancing how much they let someone in versus how much they pull away. They crave connection, but they fear losing control, so they build relationships in a way that keeps them feeling safe. But when you go no contact, when you remove yourself from their world completely, a powerful shift happens. Uncertainty enters the equation, and uncertainty is what starts the obsession. When a relationship follows a predictable pattern, the brain doesn't have to work too hard to make sense of it. If they pull away and you chase, their mind remains at ease because they know what to expect. They know you'll reach out, they know you'll try to reconnect, and they know they can engage on their own terms. This predictability allows them to remain in control while still keeping you emotionally invested. But when that pattern is broken, when they expect you to chase but you don't, their mind begins to panic. At first, they may not even notice. Avoidants are used to having space, so in the beginning, they might convince themselves that the silence is normal, but as time passes, as the texts stop coming, as the reassurance they once took for granted disappears, their brain starts seeking answers. And this is where obsession begins. The mind craves closure. When something doesn't have a clear resolution, the brain continues searching for explanations, replaying memories, analyzing past interactions, and trying to make sense of the situation. The avoidant, who once felt comfortable in their emotional withdrawal, suddenly starts experiencing an unfamiliar feeling, a lack of certainty about you. Are you really gone? Have you moved on? Were they wrong about your attachment to them? Are they losing something they didn't realize they needed? These thoughts begin to creep in, slowly at first, then more frequently as the silence stretches on. The absence of communication doesn't just leave an empty space, it creates a mystery, and the brain hates unresolved mysteries. They start checking their phone more often, wondering if they missed a message from you. They start scrolling through your old texts, looking for signs that you cared more than they acknowledged. They might even check your social media, trying to see if you seem happier without them, trying to gauge if you're thinking about them as much as they're thinking about you. And then something even more powerful happens. Their own imagination starts working against them. When someone is present in our lives, we experience them in real time. We see their flaws, their habits, their emotions, and everything about them is tangible. But when someone disappears, when they become a memory rather than an active presence, the mind starts romanticizing them. The brain fills in the blanks, often in an exaggerated way. The things that once annoyed them about you fade into the background. The emotional connection they once downplayed now feels more significant. The security they once took for granted suddenly feels like something they're missing. And this is why avoidants, despite their nature, often start obsessing over the person they pushed away. It's not just about missing you, it's about the uncertainty of losing you. It's about the fact that they don't know where you stand anymore, that they don't have control over your emotional presence in their life, and the more they try to ignore it, the more the thoughts persist. Lack of validation triggers their hidden attachment wounds. Avoidants build their identity around the idea that they don't need external validation. They tell themselves that they are independent, that they can handle life on their own, that they don't need constant reassurance from others, but underneath that self-sufficiency is a deeper truth. They crave validation just as much as anyone else. They just don't like admitting it. Throughout the relationship, they receive subtle forms of validation from their partner. It might come in the form of a simple text message, a check-in, or an attempt to reconnect after they pulled away. Even if they don't actively acknowledge it, these small gestures reinforce their sense of worth. They confirm that someone cares about them, that they are wanted, that they hold value in someone else's life. But when no contact is initiated, that steady flow of validation disappears. Suddenly, they aren't getting the reassurance they were used to, even if they never outwardly asked for it. The absence of validation forces them to confront something they've been avoiding all along, their own attachment wounds. Avoidants often have a deeply ingrained fear of being unwanted or unimportant. This stems from childhood experiences where their emotional needs weren't fully met. As a result, they learn to suppress their need for external reassurance, convincing themselves that they were fine on their own. But no matter how much they suppress it, that need still exists beneath the surface. And when it stops being met, when you go silent and no longer give them any indication that they matter, it triggers a deep emotional reaction. At first, they might try to rationalize it. They might tell themselves that your absence doesn't affect them, that they don't need the reassurance, that they are better off without the emotional complications. But the subconscious mind doesn't work that way. It doesn't care about logical reasoning. It reacts to emotional loss. The validation they once received from you, whether it was direct or indirect, was a source of comfort. Even if they rejected closeness, they still relied on the knowledge that you were there. And when that safety net is removed, the part of them that craves validation starts panicking. This is why avoidants often reach out in subtle ways after no contact. They aren't always direct about their feelings, but they might, like an old photo, send a casual message or find some excuse to initiate small talk. These actions aren't random. They're an attempt to test whether or not they still hold value in your world. They need to know if they still have access to the validation they once received. Because deep down, their greatest fear isn't intimacy, it's being forgotten. It's the idea that someone who once valued them no longer does, that they were once a priority, but now they're just another name from the past. And when that realization sets in, it triggers the very wounds they've been trying to avoid. They may not reach out immediately, they may fight the urge to acknowledge their emotions, but as time goes on, as the absence of validation continues to gnaw at them, they start feeling something they never expected, a need for the very connection they once resisted. And when that feeling becomes too strong to ignore, the desire to reestablish that validation becomes overwhelming. They assume they have unlimited time until they realize they don't. Avoidants operate under the belief that time is always on their side. They convince themselves that they can return whenever they choose, that no matter how much distance they create, the option to reconnect will always be available. This belief allows them to withdraw without fear because in their mind, there's no real risk of loss. They assume that if they ever want to re-engage, they'll be able to, and that assumption keeps them from fully processing the consequences of their actions. When you go no contact, you shatter that illusion. At first, they may not react. They might assume that the silence is temporary, that eventually you'll reach out like before. But as time passes and there's still no sign of you, a realization starts creeping in. They may have miscalculated. The security they once felt about your presence begins to erode. They start wondering if you've actually moved on, if you're done for good, if they've lost something they thought they had all the time in the world to reclaim. This creates an internal conflict. On one hand, they want to maintain the belief that they are unaffected, that they don't need to take action. On the other hand, the longer they wait, the stronger the doubt grows. They start looking for signs, checking to see if you've left the door open, hoping for any indication that they still have access to you. But when they find nothing, when they realize that you aren't waiting around, their once comfortable detachment begins turning into anxiety. The mind doesn't like the idea of something being permanently lost, especially when it once felt secure in its availability, and this is where obsession begins. The longer they sit in uncertainty, the more their brain fixates on the fact that they don't have a guaranteed way back to you. They start replaying moments, overanalyzing past conversations, questioning whether they underestimated the depth of what you had. The confidence they once had in their ability to return starts to crumble, and in its place, a new feeling emerges. They start thinking about reaching out, but their fear of rejection keeps them hesitating. They don't want to admit they were wrong, they don't want to expose their vulnerability, but they also don't want to risk you slipping away completely. This battle between pride and fear of loss creates an emotional tug-of-war that only grows stronger with time, and as they sit in that unresolved tension, their mind keeps pulling them back to you over and over again. They start idealizing the past and forgetting the reasons they pulled away. When someone is actively in our lives, we see them for who they truly are, flaws, imperfections, and all. But when they're gone, when they become a memory instead of a daily presence, the mind starts to distort reality. This is especially true for avoidants. While they might have pulled away because they felt overwhelmed, the further they get from their relationship, the more their perception of it starts to change. In the beginning, they may feel relief. They tell themselves they made the right choice, that distance was what they needed, that the emotions were too much, but as time passes and the intensity of their initial feelings fades, something else happens. Their brain starts focusing on the good moments instead. They start remembering the connection, the laughter, the way you made them feel safe. The arguments and tensions that once seemed so significant begin to blur, while the warmth and comfort of the relationship become more vivid. This happens because the brain has a natural tendency to romanticize the past. When someone is no longer around, we don't experience their flaws in real time, so our memories of them become selective. For an avoidant, this is especially powerful because they spent so much time suppressing their emotions when they were with you. But now, with no new interactions clouding their perspective, their mind starts bringing up everything they didn't fully process before. The love, the moments of connection, the things they didn't appreciate at the time. This shift is what makes no contact so effective. When you're no longer in their life, they aren't reminded of the reasons they pulled away. They aren't experiencing the day-to-day moments that made them hesitant about closeness. Instead, they're left with a curated version of the relationship, one that highlights all the things they miss while conveniently downplaying the things that made them withdraw. And as this idealized version of the past takes hold, they start feeling something they never expected: regret. They begin questioning their decisions, wondering if they let go of something valuable, wondering if they were too quick to pull away. They might not act on these feelings immediately, but they linger, growing stronger with time. And the longer they go without resolution, the more their mind keeps drawing them back to you, making them crave the very connection they once tried to escape. Their fear of emotional dependence turns into a fear of losing you. Avoidants spend most of their relationships guarding themselves against emotional dependence. They associate closeness with the loss of autonomy, so they instinctively push people away when things start to feel too intense. They convince themselves that needing someone is a weakness, that they are better off maintaining emotional distance. But when you go no contact, something shifts. The absence of you doesn't just create space, it creates a void. At first, they may try to convince themselves that nothing has changed, that your silence doesn't affect them. They bury themselves in distractions, in work, in routines that keep their mind occupied. But no matter how much they try to ignore it, the reality starts creeping in. The emotional safety net they once had, knowing that you were there, knowing that you cared, knowing that they had access to you, is gone. And for someone who has spent their life trying to avoid emotional dependence, this is terrifying. They start questioning their own reactions. If they were truly as independent as they believed, why does your absence feel so noticeable? Why do they keep thinking about you when they told themselves they wouldn't? Why does the idea of you moving on trigger something deep inside them? These thoughts become louder as time passes, and the fear that once drove them to avoid closeness is replaced by something even stronger, the fear of losing you entirely. This creates an internal conflict. Their logical mind tells them that they should be fine, that they don't need anyone, that they made the right choice by keeping their distance. But their emotions are telling them something else. They're feeling things they didn't expect: longing, regret, uncertainty. They start realizing that their attachment to you was stronger than they allowed themselves to acknowledge. They start recognizing that the connection they downplayed actually mattered to them. And the more they fight these feelings, the stronger they become. Eventually, they reach a tipping point. They can't ignore the impact of your absence anymore. The fear of being dependent on you starts to fade, and in its place, the fear of losing you permanently takes over. They begin to wonder if they pushed you too far, if you've truly moved on, if they've lost something they didn't fully appreciate at the time. And once that fear sets in, it becomes nearly impossible to ignore. When they sense you're truly gone, they start chasing. Avoidants are wired to seek control in relationships. They create emotional distance not because they don't care, but because they need to feel like they are in control of their own emotions. They push people away to maintain a sense of independence, convincing themselves that they can walk away at any time without consequences. But the moment they sense that control slipping, the dynamic shifts. When they start believing that you're truly gone, that's when the chase begins. At first, they don't react. They assume you'll come back, that you'll reach out, that the pattern will repeat itself. But as time passes and there's no sign of you, the realization starts sinking in. You aren't waiting for them. You aren't chasing them. You aren't holding space for them anymore. And this is what triggers their deepest fear, the fear of irrelevance. Avoidants may act like they don't need validation, but deep down they crave the reassurance that they matter. As long as they feel like you're still emotionally invested, they feel safe keeping their distance. But when they start sensing that your focus has shifted, that your energy is no longer directed toward them, that you've detached in a way they never expected, panic sets in. They start looking for signs that they still have a place in your life. They check your social media, they think about texting, but hesitate. They find themselves reminiscing about moments they previously dismissed. The thought of you moving on without them, of you no longer caring, of them losing access to the connection they once took for granted, starts consuming them. And the harder they try to suppress it, the stronger it gets. Eventually, that fear overrides their avoidance. They start testing the waters, maybe a random text, a casual like on your post, an excuse to check in. They might not dive in fully at first, but every small action is a way of gauging whether they still have a hold on you. If they sense that you're slipping away for good, that's when the chase truly begins. Because for an avoidant, it's never about wanting someone who is available. It's about wanting someone they feel like they might lose. And once they realize that they no longer have control over your presence, their avoidance turns into pursuit. And that's the paradox, isn't it? Avoidants spend so much time running from emotional dependence, but the moment they realize you're truly gone, they start chasing, they start obsessing, because they never thought they'd lose you for real. They assumed they had time until they didn't. So what does this mean for you? It means power lies in your ability to walk away, not in games, not in manipulation, but in truly reclaiming your own value. Because when you stop seeking their validation, when you stop proving your worth to someone who took you for granted, that's when they finally see it. And by then, the choice is yours. Do you take them back? Do you let them chase? Or do you realize that the real power wasn't in their reaction, but in the moment you finally chose yourself? This is Tony Robbins. Track if this hit home. Make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this with someone who needs to hear it, because this isn't just about avoidance. This is about breaking free, standing strong, and owning your worth. Let's go.